Welcome to Illo Talk. I am Cory Kerr, and this is episode 116. Today, we're going to talk about how to develop or come up with a message in your art. Okay, so I've got to start by saying I just recorded and edited a whole thing, and then I lost it. And that makes me sad. So I don't want to redo this. It was okay. It was even more than okay. It was passable. So anyway, that's gone. Couple announcements before we get started. I'm going to start doing some interviews. I'm pretty excited about it. And I've done a couple in the past. I liked it. And it is way more work than this, but I think it'd actually be really interesting. And so I've got one scheduled for tomorrow night that I will put up later this week as soon as I get it edited and whatnot. And I'm going to start inviting some other people to come along. The big hesitation for me is that I have to get over the fact it's imposter syndrome. I've got to get over this idea that I am not worth other people's time. So as soon as I, build up the courage to invite a couple more people and say, hey, person that I respect and follow your work, would you mind spending time with me? We will have some more interviews. If you guys have some ideas, I would love to hear ideas of people that I could interview in the comments. That would be great. I've got some ideas as well. I'm sure that some of them will say no. And it's possible that some of them will say yes. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, that'll be fun. So we'll do that. And also, what you see me drawing right now is a skeleton. And this is going to become an asset that I'm going to give away for free. It'll be Photoshop with layers that you can go in and use to teach yourself how to animate and rig a character. And so it'll go along with my AI to AE playlist. And I will release that soon. So stay tuned. And if you're not following me on Twitter or subscribing to this, subscribe. All right. That's that. So there's some news out of the way. Today I want to talk about message. Before I talk about how to develop a message, I want to talk about why to develop a message. I feel like I just said this because I did literally just say this. But it's gone. It's gone now. Got to focus on the present, not regret the fact that I just wasted an hour of my life. Okay, so let's see if we can be more succinct this time. Maybe the second time around will be better. Not so far, since I'm just complaining about losing the corrupted file. But here we go. Art without a message is just pretty. It doesn't do anything. Now, I'm not saying that message has to be really important or significant, but it has to say something. There has to be something to it. When I first got started, I wouldn't even say that I was started in art yet because I wasn't even drawing. But when I first graduated from college years ago with my bachelor's, I got a computer. I bought a cheapo, lowest end Wacom that I could get, and I started designing t-shirts. I don't want to tell you with whom because they are terrible, and for some reason I can't take them down. And they're really bad. And I didn't know how to draw, and I didn't try to learn how to draw, and that's an episode later where I will talk about why you need to learn how to draw. But they were really bad. And I didn't have anything to say. I wasn't trying to say anything. And so sometimes you'll come across something and you'll go, wow, that looks incredible. That's amazing. I'm impressed just by the craftsmanship that it took to do that. It's not saying anything. There's not a message behind it. There's not even a feeling or an emotion, but it's just really impressive. Lacking message. The other end of that spectrum is the message really lands with you and you really like it. Or it speaks to you, or it says something that you agree with or disagree with, or it describes or alludes to a specific experience or event or time in your life. But the art isn't that great. And that can there's a lot of comics that are like really decently written and poorly drawn, and you can kind of get through it and it can still be good. And there's a lot of comics that are really poorly written but amazingly drawn, and you can kind of get through it. The golden chalice, the holy grail, is when the visuals and the message come together and make something amazing. You know, an illustration, a sticker, an animation, a poster or something. Those are awesome, right? My early attempts at t-shirts had nothing. They weren't good from a visual standpoint. They didn't look good. They weren't interesting looking. They weren't well composed. The colors were bad and the craftsmanship was non-existent. But worse than that, I wasn't saying anything. I didn't have anything to say. There was no message. So there was like zero reason to engage with that work. And since then, I've developed somewhat of a formula to come up with ideas, at least the kernel of the idea of how to generate a message. So let me talk about this. I have seen people render, expertly rendered, and I've done this myself, still life or studies or life drawing. Those are really awesome, right? From a craftsmanship and skill standpoint, as an artist, I can appreciate the work that goes into that. But if the only thing that you do is make something look like a photograph or render something the way that you see it, it's a good learning tool. It's a good way to excel in your abilities, but it's not a work that anybody wants to engage with. It's just practice. It's just leveling up, which is good in and of itself, but it's not an end result. And so without a message, all you've really learned is you've gotten better, which I don't want to discount. But the message and the underlying concept, the idea behind it. Think of old newspaper comics, political cartoons and things like that. They had something to say, and they had to say that thing every day, and oftentimes it was rendered, I don't want to say sloppy, but sometimes they were sloppy, but quickly, at least very quickly, enough so that you get the idea and the message, right? And people would engage with those, not because they were art, I don't want to say that, not because they were something that you would hang up on your wall, fine art, right? But they would engage with it on a level where the message connected, right? Whereas if you just have the visual and there's nothing underneath that, I feel like there's several terms that kind of go with that are a little crass. But anyway, so message is important. Message is what people engage with. The art, the visual style, the way that it is interpreted and executed is going to be what catches people. The message is going to be why people stay. So with that, I want to say this isn't the only way to do this, but this is a way to develop a message. Now, I don't think that you need to do this all the time. I know a guy who he wrote a book, and he told me, have you ever just felt like you had to do something? Like there was just something inside of you and it was just going to eat its way out if you didn't let it out? That was this book. He said, I just had to get it out. Like it was just inside of me burning and tearing me apart until I released it. And it was a good book. I think with that particular piece of work, it could use some craftsmanship, and I think it got a little precious for him. And so it was hard for him to revise and whatnot, but it was good. It was good. I liked it, and it was okay. And the message was good. The craftsmanship could have been better. That's one way of doing it, right? Where you just have to. You're just driven. You just can't not do it. But that's a rare and a random way of doing it. That's a way where you're waiting on the muse to inspire or infect you in a way that is outside of your control. And I like to be creative on a schedule, and I like to be creative on demand. And where creativity does not bow down to my will, it will show up more often than not if I have procedures and practices in place. So here is, if you're struggling with a message, if you're struggling with coming up with an idea of something to say, here's a way that you can do that. One is identify a problem. Okay? Identify a problem that you don't like. Find something in the world that makes you angry. Find something in the world that makes you upset. Find something in the world that should change, that should stop. Or find something that makes you happy. Find something that brings you joy. Find something that should continue, or there should be more of. Something that elicits some kind of emotion, right? And stay away from this idea of your favorite thing. I have a real problem committing to a favorite thing. My daughter used to ask me, hey, what's your favorite color? And I don't know, she's like 2 or 3, and I would be like, I don't know, sweetie. Black today? I guess it's black, but it could be red. It depends on the application, right? I could never commit to my favorite color or my favorite food or my favorite movie or my favorite song or whatever, because I can't pick one thing. What if I'm in a different mood? What if I'm in a different situation? What if I have a different solution that I need? One thing, I can't commit to one thing. So don't pick the favorite thing or the worst thing. Don't try to rate things. Don't just choose something that elicits some sort of response, right? Something that hits you somehow. And don't try to rate it on the most important thing or your favorite thing or your most hated thing or the biggest problem or whatever. A thing that elicits some kind of response, okay? A problem is usually the best way to go about this. Identify a problem, not the problem, but a problem that you have with the world. That's step 1. Step 2 is think about that problem. What is the one thought that could change that problem or solve it, right? If you had a magic ray gun, right? If Pinky and the Brain came to you and said, we've built this ray gun and it will introduce Inception-like an idea into someone's mind and they will believe it, right? I used to imagine what would it be like if I had a ray gun that was like just a common sense gun and I could just force common sense into someone's brain, right? That type of gun, right? If you had this ray gun and you just zapped people with it and you could introduce a single idea and that idea would solve your problem, what would that idea be? Right? And that idea is your message. Whatever that idea is, if people would just all believe X, then Y would be solved. We would never have a problem with Y again. If everybody believed X. Y is your problem. X is your message. Then what you need to do is you need to take your message and you need to turn it into a symbol or metaphor or a visual that is approached in a creative way. Almost mask it a little bit. It's the spoonful of sugar principle, right? The spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. The medicine tastes terrible, but the sugar's pretty good. And this third step is difficult. And I'm not going to go into detail on it, on how to, but just that you need to do it. And we'll go how to a little bit later. But the reason for it is this. Brian McDonald was talking to Chris Oatley about Rod Serling. Lots of names, okay? Brian McDonald wrote Invisible Ink, excellent book on storytelling. Chris Oatley has the Oatley Academy, former Disney guy, has a podcast, right? They're talking, and Brian McDonald tells the story about Rod Serling. Rod Serling is the Twilight Zone dude, right? He's the guy that started Twilight Zone and hosted it and whatever. before Twilight Zone, he had things that he wanted to say about society. But this is when TV censorship was huge. And the censors would be like, nope, can't say that. You're going to make people mad. That's going to make people feel bad. We're all about feeling good here. There are some real problems in society, as there are today. And anyway, so there are some real problems. And yet he wasn't allowed to say anything about them because he was just saying it straight. And so what he did was he said, what if I started this thing, Twilight Zone? And instead of just saying it straight, what if I said it with monsters and aliens and spacemen and alternate dimensions and time travel? And he mixed his message, his medicine, in with science fiction. And what happened was the censors were like, cool, aliens, monsters, that's great. All right, go right ahead. Pass on through. He was saying the exact same thing that they had rejected before. Exact same thing. And yet this time he was saying it in a way that was palatable, right? And so nobody likes to be preached to. Nobody likes to be pitched to. And nobody likes to be told what to do. So I don't want you to come at me and say, you need to believe this. If you don't believe this, then you're stupid, right? That doesn't work, and I don't like it. And nobody does. A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. And so if we just force things down people's throats, it's not going to take, right? But if you can mix it in with something that is a story, in with something that's palatable, in with something that is relatable, but a step removed from reality, then oftentimes that message will land and come through, right? So here's an example, okay? Step 1, identify a problem. Step 2, develop the idea that would solve that problem. And step 3, take your message and translate it into a palatable delivery, spoonful of sugar, okay? Step 1, let's say racism, okay? Racism is a problem. It is not one that I've experienced firsthand as a white guy growing up in California. It was weird to me that people said there was racism because I had never experienced that firsthand, and it's hard for me to relate to things that I hadn't experienced, as most of us have trouble doing. And so I knew black dudes and Asian guys, and it was California. We all lived together in a small town. We all played sports together. We did our thing. And I'm sure that some of those guys would say that there was racism, and I wouldn't disagree with their experience, but I never saw it and I never experienced it. And it was a foreign concept to me, something that to me seemed like it belonged in the past long ago, right? And then as I moved to different areas and started to experience more of the world and started to see different places, and I don't want to call out specific places or whatever, but there are pockets of this world that seem like 100 years ago. And it's super weird, the way that people view other people. And I have a theory that so far has held true. I think it's true. If you ever try to hurt yourself, they have something called hesitation marks. You have a biological imperative, a natural response to protect yourself and not injure yourself. That's why we flinch when something comes at our eye. That's we don't like inflicting pain on ourselves. It naturally goes against everything that we kind of are genetically and biologically programmed. Along those lines, I don't think we can hurt other people or say negative things about other people until we categorize them as something other than us. Otherwise, we're hurting ourselves. And so this idea of no man is an island, so when you ask for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee, because we're all alike and we're all going to die and we all live on this earth and we all share this experience. And so when we share these experiences, an experience had by one person happens to us, right? An injustice that happens to someone happens to us because we're a community. But the way that we get away with doing negative things to other people is we other them. They're not us. They're someone else. And if you look at little kids, I love little kids. Not really. I mean, they're okay. They get better as they grow older. But they're pretty sociopathic human beings. When we show up to this planet, we come and we are exceptionally selfish with almost no regard for other people, to the point where a lot of it is experimentation. And I don't know how many times I had to sit down with my daughter when she was super young and just explained empathy and the golden rule or the law of karma or the law of a harvest or whatever you want to call that idea of, think about how other people will feel. How would you feel in this situation? That doesn't come naturally necessarily. I think neurologically, if you go off of Perry's neurological brain development, it's kind of impossible for a while to have empathy. And so if you, sit down and say, now, how would you feel if that happened? Like kids will do something like this. They'll see an eyeball, right? And they'll just poke it. I wonder what happens if I just poke them in the eyeball with my finger, right? They don't think that through like adults do, where it's like, that would hurt me, so that's going to hurt him, so I'm not going to do that, because that's weird, right? To hurt other people randomly. Kids are just like, I wonder what happens. Just poke somebody in the eyeball. And it's almost like a little target. You've got the circle and then another circle, and there's just this giant target there. And so I've seen kids just walk up and just be like, and it's like, why did you do that? I don't know. Would you like it if somebody did that to you? No. Then why'd you do that to him? I don't know. They just don't think that through, right? But as we grow, because that other person is not a real person to them, not like them, right? They don't realize. We don't realize when we're younger that other people are like us, okay? Anyway, all of this is to say, let's say you identify racism as your problem. You've identified a problem. That's a problem. Step 2 is, what is the idea that you could introduce into somebody's mind with your little ray gun that would solve racism, that would eliminate the problem, stop the bad parts of it happening or whatever, right? I don't know, there's good parts, but the bad part, go away. I think that message, I think the solution, the inception idea, if I could find a racist or even myself and introduce this idea of they're like you, you're like them. That's the idea. You guys are the same, right? I think that would solve the problem. I'll tell you why I think that would solve the problem. Have you ever been cut off in traffic? You're driving along, and then somebody does something stupid. They change lanes, or they cut you off, or whatever, right? And you're just so angry all of a sudden. An injustice has been done. You are mad. They put your life at risk. Think of the words that you use in your anger. You don't say things that are empathetic. You say things that are categorizing. That stupid idiot. You might even use demographic categories about their gender or their race or whatever, right? But what you are doing is you're saying that person is not like me, thus I'm not hurting myself when I'm angry with them. And have you ever had this experience? And this is just to bring it home. Somebody cuts you off. You get really mad at them. And you build a picture of who they are in your mind, right? They're a woman, they're Asian, they're whatever. Whatever stereotypes or whatever you can get mad at. You build that picture in your mind, and then you pass them, and you look over, and they're not like that. And they're like you, or they're like your mom, or they're like, somebody that you can identify with. And all of a sudden you're not mad. You're just like, well, accidents happen. It's a weird phenomenon, that, right? The fact that as long as they look and act in a way that you can categorize and not identify with, it's cool to be mad at them. But as soon as you can identify with them, you're not mad at them anymore. Because then you're You'd be angry at yourself because you've done that. We've all cut people off in traffic. We've all accidentally done something stupid and forgot to signal or whatever. Nobody drives perfectly all the time. And so as soon as your brain reconfigures and goes, they're like you, road rage is gone. That's weird, right? And so there's my idea. If I can introduce this idea to racists that they're like you, that would solve that problem. There's your message. And now you just need to, and this is another video, so I'm not going to go in depth. Now you need to add a spoonful of sugar to that. Is there a way that you could put everybody on a starship and have them explore the galaxy and interact with different things, and we see different cultures collide? Is there a way that you could change a Norman Rockwell painting to have a riot team SWAT police officer in full riot gear sitting next to a black child sharing an ice cream cone? Is there a way that you could change that message so that it's palatable and gets across? Then you actually run the risk of changing the world for the better. It's an interesting concept. And I'm not setting out to be famous. I don't expect my work to be massively accepted. I doubt that I will ever be rich or whatever, right? But think about the things that have impacted you. What has changed your moral core? What has built the foundation of what you find to be good or evil? And a lot of that you'll find it is art and music and television and movies and things that have derived from creativity. And so the things that you do, the messages that you say in your work, in your art, they don't have to be important. They can be silly. They can be funny. They can make people mad. They can make people happy. But if they do something, they're going to have an impact. And silly things like people who dress up as bats or people who put spider webs all over their red tights, and they go and do good things, that has an impact. And that impact can change the course of families and individuals and nations and societies and entire generations just based on the idea that, and I used to think this all the time as a super young kid. It's an embarrassing thought to have as like a 18-year-old, but as like a 5-year-old, I would think like, Spider-Man would do this in this situation, and there's a level of, if somebody were to just come, which my parents did all the time, this is good and this is bad. That helps. It's good for clarity or whatever. But having it delivered in a palatable manner where it's masked, literally in that case, they're wearing a mask, has a significant and lasting impact. I want to emulate and be like those people. Or that thing, or that concept that was introduced. I internalize it and it becomes mine, and it becomes a solution to a problem. I mean, you think about the X-Men, and you could say that story is about whatever. You could say it's about Jews in the 30s and 40s. You could say it's about blacks later on. You could say any group that let's not take everybody's name and let's not have a registry. And let's not put them in camps. Just because they're different doesn't mean that they're dangerous. Like that's the whole idea of X-Men. But it comes through with like people shooting lasers out of their eyes and claws coming out of their hands and controlling the weather and stuff and whatever. It came in a palatable way, which is interesting, right? Or Batman, like, what do you do when your life falls apart? Do you let that destroy you, or do you use that to fuel, making the world a better place? And you could question methods and whatever, and there's lots of arguments about that. But the idea that I got from Batman was you get back up and you keep going, no matter what happens. And Spawn was the same. That was a little bit as I was a little bit older. Everything Spawn did turned to crap. Everything he tried to do backfired on him. And yet he still tried to be good. He still tried to do the right thing over and over and over again, no matter how many times he failed at it. There's good messages in these silly things. And now I'm into more indie comics and whatnot and Star Wars and things like that. But if you look at the underlying messages that are being relayed, there's really awesome ways to do that. And so here's one way. It's not the way, but it is a way that if you are struggling, this 3-step thing will help you at least identify a message to get started. So if you want to sit down and do your work and not wait for the muses to randomly inspire you, which, take it from me, you could wait decades. You're going to sit down and do your work. Try this. Identify a problem. Identify the idea that if everyone believed it, it would solve that problem, and then take that idea as your message and turn it into something palatable and add a spoonful of sugar. And the spoonful of sugar doesn't have to be sweet. It just has to be a delivery mechanism. It's usually symbolic. Anyway, that's that. So I probably talked for long enough. What you have seen on the screen is a skeleton that I have drawn, and I'm going to give away for free. And so in my next video, when I finish the tutorial on how to rig characters in After Effects, I will let you know where that link is. And it will likely be housed at corykerr.com/tools. There isn't much there now, but there will be. And you can see, you can use that and download it and whatever, right? And that's cool. So I am Cory Kerr, and if you have made it this far in the video and haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing. And click on that little bell so you get a notification when I post new videos. And go to corykerr.com, check out my work, and check me out on Instagram and Twitter and whatnot. And I'm curious, what things have shaped your view? What messages have you come across as a kid, a teenager, or an adult that have changed the way that you've thought about things, but it wasn't really overt? Likely it'll be fiction or an illustration or something. I'm curious on that. That's all I got. So I will catch you guys later. I'm out.